so fucking special. I wish I was special, but I'm a creep. I'm a widow. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong.
Right, and welcome to 420 TV, and I have returning guest Jordan Maxwell, which I'm excited to talk to again about some ideas I've heard you talk about, and also that I just can't ignore them now that I see them bombarded on television and everywhere else I look. So I kind of wanted to start out with an idea and ask you what you thought about it, because I know that you're somewhat of an expert on just about all of the ancient peoples and the directions of their religions and kind of like little groups and cults that they make from that. But I was reading about Saddam Hussein and his obsession with the thought that he thought he was the reincarnated Nebuchadnezzar, and I know that they had just recently dug up probably about 250,000 cuneiform text out of the desert there that France and Germany were going to translate, but they never got a chance to because all of that stuff got robbed out of the Baghdad Natural History Museum. And I thought it was ironic because I keep seeing this Nebuchadnezzar name, pop up in movies and different things associated with Zion, like the Matrix is one of the famous ones, where the ship they fly around on is called the Nebuchadnezzar, and their city's Zion and all of this stuff. But there's that part in the Bible where he talks about getting people from Israel to come there and work his furnace, and they describe it kind of like a gate. It's kind of like a stargate, and then with the further stuff I found out, actually Babylon's means literally that, the gate of the gods, or the city, the gate, and then we have Ishtar's gate there. But kind of the sidetrack that I got off of that is I've been watching this show that I watched in the 90s called Stargate, and I realized that they put so many ideas in this show that are now reality. And it seemed like, I know that they had heavy influence from the Air Force as well in that show. They gave them all kinds of stuff because the show's kind of revolves around the Air Force there. And I noticed they have everything from the Egyptian gods, and it's the whole premise of the ancient astronaut theory that these gods that were on Earth were not gods more than they were just, biological entities that had better technology than, the lowly peasants on Earth there that they made. And I was going through that, and they call that Stargate, and I thought it was so funny because it's based on that. But I also wanted to get into, the idea that right now we're the last generation of human beings, like real Homo sapiens sapiens, if you would, on the Earth. Between, China recently just now admitting that they are in fact gene editing babies, so there's a replacement in the natural way, and then there's a large agenda against the family here in recent years, especially towards a certain kind of people in the Western world. They've decided that their time's over for whatever reason, and then I keep coming across the Saturn worship with all of these things, I was recently watching this thing that was talking about how the 16th letter in not only Greek and Phoenician, but also in the Hebrew language is ein or o, and it's represented as I. It's Saturn. So, and then I thought it was ironic because I was watching another show and they were talking about how that in numerology there really is no number past 9. So whenever they give these letters, the digits 1 and 6, you would have to add them, which would be 7, and that's represented everywhere. So it always goes back to Saturn, no matter how. And I was kind of wanting to know what you thought about this plan that seems to be thousands of years old, and it seems to be right now. This is it. This is when they're pulling the plug on it, because And I think 9/11 was kind of a introduction to that because of Columbia there that sits out in the ocean is represented as Sophia in the past, or like I keep seeing the same symbology with like Hathor or Diana or like all through the ancient world. It's the same character. They just keep renaming the names, and she's associated with the owl. And they confuse everybody with all of these symbols, but it's all the same. It goes back to Saturn worship or the sun, and it's like these characters. So I'm trying to figure out who these people are, and why nowadays is it that they're pulling the plug on their little plan. And kind of, if that was a mouthful for you.
Yeah, I know. A lot of really highly intelligent people are looking at the same problems and wondering the same thing. There's some kind of an operation being played out here, and we are innocent to it. We don't know what's going on, and somebody is playing a very big game with our life and with the life of this planet. I am not an atheist. Other people may think I am because of things I say. But I'm not an atheist. I do believe thoroughly in the existence or the presence of a divine power in the universe that men have called God. I don't have any problem with God and with the idea of some higher power. I don't think God is what Christianity views it as. I don't see God in my mind. I don't see God as what the churches would have you think. I see the term God in a different way. I believe, I'm thoroughly convinced in my heart that there is some kind of a computerized program from a higher source that is put into place a long, long time ago, maybe before the earth was formed. Some kind of a computerized program that encompasses the life forms in this universe, and it knows what we're doing. It has already pre-programmed it. It's in a uniform, some sort of a computerized program. And yet, in that program, we are all actors, like the old saying, the world is a stage and each of us play his part. I think that's true. I think we are all on a stage and we're playing our part. And I think that we're being led by powers in our world that we don't know exist, and we're not aware of how they influence us. But they're influencing us through a very subtle means. The powers that be that are influencing the destiny of the human race are spiritual powers that can mess with your mind. They can mess with your brain because it's a computer. And your biological nervous system in your body, we are told if they stretched out all the nervous system and connected it one to one, all the nerve systems in your body, it would go for many, many hundreds of miles inside the human body. We just got miles and miles and miles of electrical systems in our system, in our bodies. And it's all connected to a central plugged-in system called your spinal cord. And that spinal cord is connected to the computer. The computer is your brain. And our body is a biological battery. You can run out of energy. We say, boy, we're dead tired. Well, you are dead tired because you have run out of energy. And so when you get to sleep, your body reproduces the energy and you wake up and feel like you're living again. And so I think that there's some kind of a Wi-Fi, for a lack of a better term, some kind of a Wi-Fi system that's connected to the great divine computerized program, where that Wi-Fi can service all of us on the earth. We're all picking up on something. and it can change our minds. All they have to do, whoever is running this system, all they have to do is put within that computer that we humans will all do this, this, or that. And all of a sudden, overnight, we're all just doing something we've been given to do. And we don't know why we all fell into it instantaneously, but it's easy. We just do it. Why? Because that's who you are. You're a computer. Your brain's a computer, and somebody sent a program into you, and you've been programmed. So we have a television program, a radio program, and people say, you know, you need to wake up and go with the program, get with the program. I don't want any program. I don't want people programming me. But I do think that there is some kind of an otherworldly, for lack of a better term, computerized system of life that's being directed toward us. And we are living out some kind of a program that's already been laid out many, many thousands, if not millions of years ago. But in that program is room for extraterrestrial life forms who have come here from other worlds, and I'm totally sure that they are here. And within that major big program, there's all kinds of openings for all sorts of strange things to happen. I had a friend many years ago that I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I had a friend many years ago, back in the early 90s, that he had the ability. He was very talented and it was blessed with an ability to see the future. But he was so incredible that he could tell you what's going to happen to you a year from now, and he would give you the date and the day and the hour and where you will be and who you're going to be with and what you're going to be wearing and what that person's going to be wearing and what that person is going to say and what you're going to answer and what you're going to say this and that to that person, and they're going to say this to you, etc. And then this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And with that kind of detail, every time he would tell me something like that, a year later, exactly like he said, in the same place he said, in the same place, with the same person, exactly the way he said it was going to happen, they said what he said they were going to say, and without thinking, I just answered, and then I remember that's what he said I was going to say. So I'm saying, when I tell people this, most people ask me the wrong question. You don't get to the right answer with the wrong question. People will ask me, well, how in the world does he do that? I said, that's the wrong question. Don't ask that. The proper question is the fact that he can do it. What does that tell you about your personal freedom? You don't have any freedom. If we've been programmed so tightly that somebody who can read that program can go in and tell you where you're going to be in a year from now, and what you're going to be wearing, and where you're going to be, and on what corner you're going to be on, and what car you're going to be in, and what the person driving is going to be wearing, and what they're going to say to you, and what you're going to say to them. That's not being able to see the future. That's off the wall, knowing that kind of detail. How is it possible to know that kind of detail? Well, maybe it's because it's part of a computerized program, and there's nothing you're going to do to change it, period. And somebody has had their computerized brain, somehow or another has tapped into the Wi-Fi unit and gone down the line for another year in the computer and see what's going to happen. Somebody can do that. And if they have that ability, and we say they can read the Akashic record, they can read the record of the universe and tell you your future. I do know people who had that ability. I don't know if they still do it, but they did have that ability at one time. And I know that tells me that our life is not what we think it is. We are not who we think we are. We're not free. You think you're free to do this, you're free to do that, you're free to do what is in the computerized program, period. That's what your freedom is. So what does that imply for your future?
Well, it implies a very narrow path of places you could go in it. And I kind of was already thinking about this idea because, there's a lot of people that talk about what CERN is and the D wave, and basically what that is, they're using those two technologies in combination. The D wave is going down so far into the subatomic level, and then using that as a quantum computer, but they're pulling information from somewhere, and they can't explain where that somewhere is. And then, like you said, there's so many things that are pretty much, as scientists have admitted, there is a computer program out there that makes everything run, and that's why we have things like, phi and pi and all of these constants that are part of the program. I heard you say an interesting thing the other day, though, and I wanted to ask, is it possible that there's multiple programs going on? Like you were talking about, that there's a little bit of room for extraterrestrials to come kind of and maybe manipulate the program. And the reason I was thinking about that is because you were talking about how a lot of people have noticed that the planet Saturn is kind of like a satellite dish. And then, like from a certain angle, it would look like an eye. And so that would be like kind of focusing this program or this Wi-Fi right onto, and why it's so important that all of these old people always paid attention and worshiped Saturn, where the information came from. And then now it's to a new effect. Like, I don't know if you know, Elon Musk has just put up, or maybe not, they're not all up, but he plans to put 11,000 microwave satellites to beam constant Wi-Fi down to the Earth. And then there's another company that's putting 20,000 of these 5G beaming microwave. It's a whole. The technology is going to be not only coming from your neighborhood, but from space, beamed down right on you. So we're in a bubble of microwave radiation that's programmed with a computer program. So it's constantly sending data, and we know that our body interacts with that. Like you were saying, we're a computer ourselves, and now it seems like they've found a way to cut us off, in a way, from the program that's already being beamed in naturally to you to be an animal or a human or whatever on each of these planets. You're getting a program that tells life how to unfold, but now it seems like there's multiple parties trying to get their own programming in there, or maybe cut the other one off.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you one thing I know for sure. That there's no doubt in my mind at all, because of what I've seen and heard from all kinds of people around the world over the years. I've heard it many times from many people in many countries telling me of their personal experiences. And that is, there's no doubt in my mind, there are competing dimensions. We are living in a multi-dimensional life. While we're living here on this earth every day in our life, there are other worlds of activity going on right here in front of you. You just don't see it. But there are other histories and things which are happening in another world that are happening right here with you. And once in a while, as life would have it, our computerized brain, just for some reason, can pick up on a signal, which is, it happens in computers. They will pick up on a different program and switch over for a moment. You say, I just screwed up. The computer just screwed up and went to another place. Why? The reason why the computer screwed up and went to another place is because there is another place that the computer could go to. It wasn't supposed to, but it could. If you knew about it and you directed the computer to go there, it would be there. Well, it's there anyway. And so when you're looking at the computer looking this way, something happens and it popped over there for a moment, and you see something over there that you weren't expecting, and it comes back. The mere fact it could do that is because there is, in fact, something over there that the computer is designed to connect to. And so I think that there are other dimensions right here on the earth that living with us right now. So while we're sitting here talking, there could be another dimension that's 10,000 years old, maybe 30,000 years old, 100,000 years old, that's happening right now. And that if you could see it, then you would see dinosaurs and you would see all kinds of off the wall things going on the earth if you could see it. But your brain is not designed like a computer to just go one place at a time. But I have seen things with my own eyes that are not of this world, and I know what I saw, and I'm not stupid. I know what it was that I saw, and it was not of this world. And I've heard too many other intelligent people, highly placed intelligent people, tell me the same thing about their life, that they have seen things from another time in another place. And exactly, they were right in the middle of it. And then they came back like in time machine. You come back to the reality you're living in. Well, where the hell were you just now, a couple of hours ago, when you were in another world and experiencing another world system in another place and in the universe? Where were you? And now you've come back here. Well, in point of fact, you didn't go anywhere. You were right here to start with. The computer is sitting on the table. It hasn't gone anywhere, but it picked up on another program in another universe. And you were part of it. You were there. So that implies.
And you know that it's funny that you say that, because I think it was like a week ago, NASA came out with an article that pretty much they were admitting that our universe that we conceive here, like, where the stars and the planets and all that stuff that we call the known universe, is actually unfolding into a universe that already existed. And now they're thinking that this may be the explanation for stuff we call dark matter and dark energy and stuff. It's things that were already here before we were here, or at least our matter and what we think of as our realm or our dimension. So we're unfolding into another dimension that's already, like you said, it's right here, right now, but it's not here. It's somewhere else.
That's right. But your brain can access it by chance. If it's just a fluke, but if your brain quickly changes, because your brain is a computer and it picks up on this other presence in the universe, because of your brain, you are there and you're experiencing things and seeing things and communicating with people and part of that universe. And then all of a sudden, poop, you pop back here. Now you're talking to us again. So you popped into another reality, then you came back. I know that is absolutely possible.
So do you think that that's literally what, because I do a show called the 420 News, and I kind of go over headlines and keep track of some of the weirder headlines instead of the mainstream, what everybody else is talking about. And for the past couple of years, the Catholic Church has been saying that, in their opinion, and they're only saying it about Italy, but it tells you what they think of the whole world. And they're saying, and this is coming from this group of people that is involved with pedophilia and all that. They say that half of Italy right now is possessed with some other kind of entity, whatever I guess they're claiming it's demons. But then when you know that they're not really into the upfront Christian religion that they're selling, and that they're actually worshiping other things that have nothing to do with and you think some of these beings that started this, or maybe some of them are biological, but other ones like you talk a lot about how there's groups that worship the moon, the sun, Saturn, and these groups are kind of the same groups as well. So these are all important things to all of them. But they have these other entities, like, when everybody celebrated Saturnella, I guess it was called, in the Roman Empire, and then you had Yule to the north, and they would represent that stuff with like a goat, because a lot of people don't know that there was a goat before there was this Santa Claus character. It was a guy in a goat, and actually he expected gifts from children. And there's a lot of weird art that you could say transmits into Hollywood now, where with the obsession of stealing children's energy in all the different ways, without getting into that they believe in doing that. And then there's millions of people that have experiences that are pretty similar, like shadow people messing with them while they're asleep and sleep paralysis. It's like
That's right.
they're there, but they're not there, but they know we're here, and they're trying to interact with us, or at least tap into our program. And the headline on Drudge right now is how you can download your soul into a chip, and live forever in virtual reality. And they have this new Church of the AI, and that goes back to what I was saying with this D-Wave. They're getting, in quantum computing, they're pulling information from nowhere, from another place, another dimension, whatever you want to call it. And like you said, all of our technology seems to be going in the direction that it was designed from the beginning to tap into that.
Exactly, and there was a lady scientist that was giving a lecture on TED. Have you ever seen the TED lectures? TED, the TED lectures. Well, this lady was a physicist, and she was saying the name of her lecture was, "What is the brain for? Why do we have humans who have brains? What is a brain for? What does it do?" And point of fact, we normal people have all kinds of ideas of what the brain is doing. But scientifically, what do we know that the brain does? And it only does one thing only. It controls all the movements, everything that needs to move. It controls the movements of your hands, the movements of your body, all the things that when you're jumping, when you're running, the brain controls all the body's movements. It controls everything in the body. When you're breathing, what you're doing, when you're having an ache or pain, the brain is controlling movements of the body only. It is not in any way contributing to thoughts. Thoughts are not in the brain. And so she said, well, where do our imaginations and our ideas and our thoughts come from? We know it's not in the brain. The brain is a physical thing that's controlling the body. But where does the knowledge and wisdom and understanding and the interest and fascination with subjects come from? And she said, scientifically, we don't know. We have no idea where wisdom and knowledge and education and knowledge comes from. It's not from the brain. We are all tapped into something. She said, we're all tapped into some kind of a matrix, some kind of a computerized form that is feeding us knowledge and feeding us information and causing us to think and causing us to speak and say things that we don't even know where it's coming from. That's why you can sit down with a person and he just starts talking. Well, where's it coming from? Did he write that script, yesterday? No, he's just talking. It's just coming out of his mind. He's just talking. Well,
it even seems to be limited. I was actually talking to my son the other day about that, he was telling me, well, where do we get ideas? And I was saying, I don't know, but I know that we never get new ideas, like really new ideas. Like you can't think of a color you've never seen or imagine a sound you've never heard. You have to have some kind of reference.
And there's nothing new under the sun, as the scripture says. So there's no new situation that could happen that's never happened before. No, whatever happens in the world, no matter how off the wall and screwy it is, it's happened many times before. It's just now you're experiencing it. And so I know that there's different dimensions. There's no doubt in my mind because of my own personal experiences. I have seen things and been in a place to see things which I know were said to be prehistoric and gone millions of years ago. Well, they're not gone millions ago. I could take you to see things which are said to have been prehistoric and extinct millions of years ago. I saw them. And so if I saw them and they were extinct millions of years ago, that means I was seeing a different dimension for that moment. My eyes and my personal self was able to go into a different dimension and see something which in fact does not exist now, but did exist millions of years ago. Well, I saw it with my own eyes. And so, how did I see something today? In my life today, I see something that I know existed millions of years ago. Well, but I did see it. And so it tells me I wasn't there millions of years ago. But for some reason, my brain, being a computer, picked up on something that's a reality today, but it was played many millions of years ago, and so I picked up on it and I saw it. So that tells me that there's different dimensions, different things going on the earth, and so I have a friend, a doctor friend of mine. He took me to meet one of his friends who was an old man, about 95 years old. He was he was a Navy flyer. And this old guy was about 95 years old. He was a Navy flyer. And he was telling us when we went over to see him, we got to talking about strange things. And he was telling us his story. He said that many years ago, he was a squadron leader leading a group of planes into the Bermuda Triangle. And he said, we didn't think of it as the Bermuda Triangle. That's where we were. But today you call it Bermuda Triangle. That's what we were. And he said, and I was a pilot. I was a head pilot. I was the pilot. And he said, and as we went into the Bermuda Triangle, he said, all people do not know that when you enter the Bermuda Triangle, your compass on a ship or plane or whatever, your compass immediately changes. The moment you fly into a Bermuda Triangle, your compass is all, no matter where it is, no matter what kind of compass, it will change instantly from magnetic north to true north. There's a big difference between true north and magnetic north. And if you're flying in a plane, it's using a compass that goes by magnetic north. You enter the Bermuda Triangle, and immediately all compasses point to true north. No matter what kind of, if you're on a plane or a boat, it doesn't matter. Why? Why is it just in the computer, just in the Bermuda Triangle, all compasses change instantly to true north? I don't know. It's just fascinating. Something's down there. Something's causing it. But he was saying that when he was a squadron commander, he was leading a group of planes, and he was a lead plane. He was a lead man, and he said, I turned to my co-pilot and told him to take over. I'm going to the boys' room and take a smoke. And he said, so I went back into the back of the plane, went to the men's room, and he said, and lit up a cigarette, and I was talking and thinking, and he said, so when I came out, I was in a different plane. I was in a totally different plane. And he said, and all the soldiers were soldiers from the 40s. They were all dressed in U.S. military form, Navy, flying, but it wasn't U.S. Navy. It was like some kind of a naval operation with U.S. insignias, but it wasn't modern day. It wasn't my time. This goes back to a long time ago. And he said, and I looked at them, and they looked at me, and he said, everybody saw me, and they were wondering, who the hell are you? Where did you come from? And he said, I'm thinking the same thing. Where am I? I was in my plane. I went to the bathroom. I come out. I'm in a different plane. And he said, they came up and grabbed me and held me and took me up to the pilot. And they said to the pilot, this man was on the plane. We just came out of the men's room. He was on the plane. So they thought I was a stowaway. And he said, and they told the captain, he's a stowaway. And the captain said, well, hold on to him, and he will be arrested when we land. And he said, I told him, you can't arrest me. I am a captain. See these stripes? Yeah, you know who you're talking to here? And he said, it doesn't matter how many stripes you got. On this plane, I'm the captain. You're on my plane, and I didn't bring you here, so we're arresting you when we land. Don't tell me about your stripes. I don't care who you are. We'll let the government figure it out. And he said, so I argued with him for a little bit, and the captain says, if you're the captain, you want to fly my plane? And he said he just made the gesture. He's going to get up. Here, you want to fly it? And he said, I looked at the plane, and I couldn't read. I didn't know how to fly this plane. I didn't know how to read any of this. And yet it's an American-built plane, and these are American flyers. I'm one of them, but I'm from another time, and I'm in the Bermuda Triangle, and another person's plane, and from another era of time. And so he says, so I'm just telling you, at 95 years old, I'm just telling you what happened to me. I don't know how to explain it. That's just my experience. Well, that tells me this is the old man was not making this up for a movie or a television show. He was just telling you what happened. Well, that's like the ancient people. They told us stuff from the ancient Sumerian days. They told us from 5,000, 7,000 years ago. They told us things and stories, and we think, oh, it's a bunch of silly, nonsensical bull mythologies and all that silly stuff. No, they were just people 5,000, 7,000 years ago who actually saw things with their own eyes and experienced things, and they were trying to explain it and write it down what they saw, so that they're telling you something that today sounds absolutely outrageous and stupid to us today. Yeah, but you weren't there. And yeah, wait till you see something that doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, I have
And you're
myself, and I didn't know whether to chalk it up to imagination or stress, but I didn't really have any stress at the time, so it was hard to, blame it on that. But I kind of think that the weird way that our technology and society is going right now, like I read every other day some new, niche that's made for human beings that we've always filled and had a purpose for is now being replaced by some kind of AI, a robot, or a learning machine. And then at the same time, nowadays they can literally upload and download DNA through DNA printing and virtual DNA in the computer. So they can design out a whole DNA strand in the computer, print it, and then inject it into you. And now that we're doing stuff like gene-edited babies, and it seems like they're trying to change over right now. And what's going on is I know that for the Western world, most of us are, not me personally, but most of people are infertile now. They can't even have children. And there's going to be a point in which everybody realizes that they got, sold a bag of goods there with the vaccines and the GMOs, and now everybody's sterile, and the children that they do have are kind of, and no offense, but they're little autistic, screeching, and they can't fit into the same way that people in my generation or anybody before me worked in the world. Like their brains are different now because of being handed a tablet since being a toddler, and things like this. So it's like they're trying to change the human over to something that can't tap into these other realms. So we're more of I don't know, another way to say it is kind of like a gray, I guess. A little automaton that's biological but no longer has any kind of intellect or anything. And, it might be good at one thing, like a lot of autistic children are good at one thing, like music or drawing or something, but everything else they can't figure out how to do anything. So they have one function now that's kind of programmed to them. And it seems like now they're done with the experiment, though, so they got to get rid of us for these new designed people and machine learning. And now, like I said, they're talking about you can just upload and download the information. And I think you're right. So it couldn't be a soul that they're talking about if the soul and real thought doesn't even reside in our machine that we walk around in. So what is it that they're putting in there? It can't be the essence of man, or is that the whole reason they're trying to get rid of that, except for a few elite people to be able to enjoy that they're a regular human still?
Well, I think that there is some kind of a mutation going on purposely to change the human race into a different kind of creature. That is, in my opinion, obvious. They are reprogramming our minds and our brains around the world. And the thing that I do is pattern recognition. I've always been good at seeing patterns in things. And I see a profound pattern recognition of people all over the earth being reprogrammed into a different kind of life. And this is why they're destroying all cultures. All the cultures of the world are being destroyed. And they want to amass, somebody wants to amass all the cultures into one culture. And I remember that one Masonic writer, Albert Pike, wrote he was a very famous Masonic author, Albert Pike. In the first couple of pages of his book, he said something that caught my attention. And I've thought about it ever since. When I was young, very young, I read it. He said, if you want to control the whole world, don't worry about having to control all the humans on the earth. Learn how to control one man and one woman, because all men are men. So you learn how to control a man, you've learned how to control the world of men. If you learn how to control the ideas and thoughts and the life of a woman, you now can control all women because they're all the same. So therefore, it boils it down to not all the people of the world, but what is a human man? What is a man and what is a woman? Where did we come from? And then you begin to go back into the Old Testament of the Bible in Genesis. And in Genesis, it has an incredibly fascinating story there that most people have never heard before, and the churches don't know anything about. And the people in churches, the clergy that do know, they're not telling the Christians anything. They're not telling you the truth. They're giving you fanciful stories, because that's all we humans want, is just to hear a nice story. That's all we want. When we go to a movie, it doesn't mean it's going to change your life. It just means it's an interesting story. That's all we were paying for. We don't want to change our life. We just want to see a different story. So we pay money to go see a movie. Well, that's what's happening in a church. That's why when you go to a movie, you go to a theater. The word THE in Greek is God. God is THE. The is God. This is why if you're going to study, the study of God is called theology. And, theology gives us theocrat. Theocracy is the rule of God. The is God in the ancient Greek. And that's why when you go to a church, it is a theater, because it is a show about God. It's a God show, the theater. And so it's a fascinating and profoundly complex story about how we are created in the image and likeness of God. And what are you talking about when you talk about God? Like I said, I don't see God in the same way other people do. I believe that what we're talking about is some kind of an incredible, unbelievable, unfathomable subject of a world computerized system of life in our galaxy. And that's an incredible story. It's not a God that loves little children and created the flowers and created the beautiful things on the earth. That is the same God created the black widow spiders, the boa constrictors, and the predator animals, and the lions that eat other animals and tear them apart and eat them, and all of the wars and the violence and the pornography and the craziness and lunacy, alcoholism and drug addiction and murder. It's all part of God's creation. I don't see God as just one wonderful father. No, the creator is the creator of all things. And there must be some kind of a computerized system that the creator has put into place which controls his
You
creation,
know,
period.
that you say that, and I've had this thought before, that there's kind of only two possibilities with the all creator God. And that's like one, like you said, that he's was actively involved from the very beginning in every detail of how things would unfold. Or another option is that our existence is an experiment, and we know that you can't observe an experiment without changing it. So it would seem like if there was a God that had an experiment and there was going to let free will go, that we would have to be in a bubble, with time there, and he would have to be outside. But if you think if God has no time and he's outside of that bubble of time, the experiment would be over immediately for God. Like he would start it and it would end to him instantaneously. But for us, we're this big old long chain of events of things interacting. And you only really get two choices with that. That's God's was involved in the whole thing, or he set himself apart, didn't pay attention to it because he didn't want to change the outcome of the experiment, which we know that happens. If you observe something, you're changing it just from the simple fact of, we still don't get that. Thinking about it, I've always took that experiment to mean that's mind over matter, because we're not putting out any particles from our eyeballs when we observe something, but yet we still change the outcome of whatever it is we're observing. And I kind of wanted to get into that too, like you were talking about this computer program, and it seems like all of the modern religions on earth that come from older religions or whatever, that we're pretty much worshiping the same characters and figures throughout the world. They named them different stuff. But I heard you talking about this world revolutionary movement. And it's kind of like, that made a lot of sense to me, because at the same time as they're programming us with all kinds of, bizarre things and trying to destroy the family on one hand, and putting out these ideas and kind of making you participate in the things that they like through the programming on television. Then also you got this group over here pretending to be the good guys, and they somehow have more money than is possible from the amount of people they have paying in tithes. So it doesn't make any sense that the same bankers are funding both sides of this weird two-sided thing here, where like you can go over here and worship with our church that's not really about what it says it's about, or you can, fall into the sinful ideas over here that we're just putting in your face at face value that it's that. And I see these weird things like, however you feel about abortion. We have Planned Parenthood, and who would have thought that all throughout time, they've been doing sacrifices, like on Saturnalia, they would have 12 days of whatever, and each day they would have a different sacrifice. And a lot of people don't want to get into who or what they were sacrificing, because some of them were human, and obviously the Romans made a big deal out of children on one of those days of the 12 days. I forgot the name of that exact day. It was like Jubilee, or I forget exactly, because I'm bad with names, but it's always centered around children. And I know there's things going on YouTube. I can't get too detailed, but everybody knows what we're talking about. And then they have nowadays, we have a Planned Parenthood that's, you can say that it's for whatever, but they've convinced people that it's their human right to kill their own descendants and end their DNA line on the earth. And not only that, they have child sacrifice in the public where nobody thinks it's a big deal. And not only that, people that don't believe in it are still participating because they have to pay their tax dollars to help do it. So they won't let you not be involved in it. And even if you try to ignore it, it'll be on television. And if they won't let you get away from it no matter where you turn.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Like I said, it's a preordained experiment. It's called the World Revolutionary Movement, WRM, World Revolution Movement. And when I came across it was when I was studying the Soviet Union. I was looking at the beginnings of the Soviet Union, and come to find out that the Soviet Union, which was the first time international communism became on the stage in Russia. And we found out that the Russian communism was thought up, the idea for it was dreamt up in the minds in Washington, D.C. and London, England. Yeah, exactly. Being socialist became the idea. It was to change the whole human race. But there were two ways of doing it. There was socialism and communism. Today, they have become one and the same thing, because socialism today is communism. But they said back then, back in the 1700s, that socialism was a slow way of slowly changing the thinking of the human race. But little by little by little, they begin to infiltrate your thinking and change your mind on things until one day you become a full-blown slave to the state. That's socialism. But today, socialism is actually communism because the communists had a different idea. They said, we don't have time to play all those games to change people's opinion and everything and change everything. So one day you become a communist. We don't have time. You just go in there, cut their heads off and shed some blood and beat them up and take them and put them on their knees and make them accept your way. Make them accept communism. Whether they like it or not, kill them and put them to death in front of everybody, and everybody else will listen. And so the communists want to do it now with violence. The socialists want to do it, slowly but surely through television and through movies and through our media, little by little. They're changing us to think like they want us to think. They don't want you thinking like you used to, concerning yourself with your freedom and your liberty and your justice and your family and your mother and your family and freedom to think and freedom to educate yourself. The people today in America's government do not want that. They don't want you doing that. They don't care about how important life is to you. They don't want you reading and studying nothing. They want you to shut up and do what you're supposed to do, and that's being called being in compliance. And so what I found out, one of the first things I began to look at when I started studying the Soviet Union and the system of government, was that Soviet money, the money that was printed in the Soviet Union, had swastikas on them. Swastikas were the symbol for the Nazis, but on the Soviet money, there are swastikas in the center of Soviet money. And on today, I think even today, I know it was there because I've seen pictures of them on the web. The passports for the Soviet Union had a big red swastika in the middle of it, on the front cover. A red swastika for the passport of the Soviet Union. Why would the Soviet Union communists have a red swastika at the same time Adolf Hitler had red swastika? There's got to be a connection there, and there was a connection between Adolf Hitler and the Soviet Union that we don't even know about. And then on so many important insignias and medals and documents of the German Nazi Party, they had hammer and sickle. They had hammers and sickles on their documents in Nazi Germany. Hammer and sickle was a symbol for the communists in the Soviet Union, and swastikas for the Soviet Union came from Nazi Germany. So both sides were using each other's symbols. And we come to find out that both sides were being financed by Americans, by American banks. British bankers, British international bankers were financing the Soviet Union and the Nazis purposely. And so it became obvious to me that there's only one operation on the earth. It's one thing. Somebody is running the earth from behind the scenes. And the best way it is, well, I've learned this from military people, the best way to change the earth is a war. It's the best way to change things quickly is a war. War comes in and changes everything, destroys a nation, kills the people, and sets up a whole new dispensation for the world after
Well,
a big
yeah.
war.
Well, let me ask you this question in a hypothetical situation. We have Israel there, how they've, pretty much it seems like the main goal of World War II was to cut a chunk out of the Middle East there. I mean, it was, and then make the euro, which is a well-known Nazi plan, but now we have that today. We call it the euro, and they're getting mad about the little nationalists that are wanting to, break away now because they had already got it where they wanted it. But we know that all three religions kind of go back to the same thing. They're the main ones. And recently I found out that the queen is actually the 43rd granddaughter of the Prophet Muhammad. So she's directly related to the Prophet Muhammad, although she's not supposedly in Islam. She was, like a Hitler Youth, and there's the whole thing about financing Hitler at the same time as pretending to be, against them. And then, so we have this whole situation going on in Jerusalem. Basically, everybody's waiting for the dome on the dome on the rock there to be taken down, so that there could be a new Solomon's temple and kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy of Armageddon and all of that. But it seems to me that that's obviously planned, and it's been planned for a long time for those events to take place at that spot. And it makes me wonder, like you were saying, that it's been said many times by Kissinger and lots of other people that the main kind of government that's they want for the New World Order or whatever would be a communist capitalist society. So after there's this big war of these three religions who like you said, don't even worship what they claim on their face to be, they're actually worshiping something else. But after that, there'll be this big, massive war, and it'll be really easy for the communists and the socialists to say, see, look, Mao was right, religion is poison, and all of this. It would be an excuse for consolidation, and then you go back to always like the Nazis allied with the Ottoman Empire. So there's always been a connection between these two groups of Islam and communism. And even today, like when you go out and you see these marches of leftists, you'll see people marching for Islam in the same crowd as the LGBT crowd, even though that, if they were in one of those countries, they'd throw them off a roof. But for right now, they're like useful idiots and allies to go march together, the quote-unquote socialists that don't realize. And it's so funny now that they got all these little socialist young people going around calling everyone else Nazis, when anybody with a brain knows that the Nazis were the socialists. You're the Nazi. That's why you're telling people to shut up and don't think, and you can't disagree with us. So I thought it was really ironic when I found that out, that the Queen of England literally is related directly to the origin of Islam. And then at the same time, they got that rock, I forgot what you call it, the little thing under the throne that's supposed to be where Jacob laid down, and so they have all these old...
That's the stone of skull.
They got all these old world traditions and with the Masonic thing, so it seems like the end result is, where they would trick everyone to being part of capitalism, but at the same time, the only religion they're allowed to have is to Saturn or the sun. It's the same worship. And I noticed, to kind of round back around where I started, the Hebrew letter, the Ayin, there, and I noticed that they use that for the New World Order, the eye symbol, the all-seeing eye. But I heard you talking about how in the old world they always showed God or Jesus or whoever. They were always in the middle of the sun. And even in most of these things where they show the eye is in the middle of the sun. So it's like the eye of God, or I don't know what they're trying to say, or their God is looking at you. It's his system, or, and I've been trying to figure out for the life of me who these characters are in the original pantheon, like maybe the Sumerians. Who are the characters? Because it seems like they mixed them up where you can't tell which one's which.
Yeah, it's very convenient that way. But you see, the ancient peoples knew they could see that the human eye is flawlessly, perfectly round. And they look at the sun as flawless and perfectly round. And so they assumed that the eye of God was the sun. The sun was the eye of God. Why? Because of what the sun represents. A lot of people believe that the ancient people were sun worshipers. They worshiped the sun. In point of fact, no ancient culture ever worshiped the sun. If you go back and read the literature of the ancient religions, it will tell you that the people venerated the sun, and it made it look like they were worshiping it. No, they were showing honor to the sun because it represented the spiritual applications of God. It represented the things of God. Why? Because it was bright. It brought light into the world. Well, that's what God does. He enlightens the world. It causes warmth to come and warms up this frozen earth so that we can live a comfortable life. So he takes care of us. And the sun is pure energy, absolute pure energy is coming from the sun. And therefore, the sun, from the energy of the sun, comes here, and we can grow our food and grow our plants and keep warm, and we can grow because we're getting energy from the sun. And so the ancient Egyptians said the sun is pure energy. If the sun were to keep its energy and not share it with us, he would live forever because energy is life. And the sun is pure energy. So if he would keep his sun, keep the sun would keep its energy, it would last forever because he is life. Energy is life. But because he's giving his energy to us, causing our food to grow and keeping our earth warm so we can live on it and grow, they said God's Son was giving his life so that we might live. That's right. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Son giving us his life. So it was not your son or Africa's son or Egypt's son. It was God's Son. God was the owner of that round globe in the sky. We call it the sun. So it's God's Son, and it was the only begotten Son of God. Well, why? Because there's only one Son, the only begotten Son that God had. And so the Son was giving his life so that we might live. So today we say Jesus died for us. No, the Son is giving his light on the earth, and the light of the sun is energy. And so he's giving his energy to keep us alive. And so you go back to the word worship. Worship is the connection between two words, worth, W-O-R-T-H, and ship, S-H-I-P. Everything in English has to do with maritime admiralty law. Maritime law is the law of the sea, of water. And what is all the business that man has on water? It's in a ship. And so we have a dealership of courtsmanship, sportsmanship, scholarship, friendship, all kinds of ships. All of our words are connected to ship, scholarship, dealership, and worship. And so we have the word worth, W-O-R-T-H, worth. And so whatever you put a high price on, whatever you think is so important, that you show the admiration for the volume of whatever it is you're interested in. You are really interested in a particular subject because it holds for you something very important. So you think it's very valuable. So therefore it's called worthship. And worthship becomes known as worship. And so when we say you worship something, that means that you're putting a high value on something. So if you put a high value on making big money, that we say you are money, you're worshiping money. If you put a high value on sex, then you're sexual, it's sex worship. Worship, the value of a thing that you find is important. And so part of the ancient world of worship, we now know, we've known it for hundreds of years. The foundation for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all three religions are based on another one, an older religion called Hinduism. Hinduism gives us the basis for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All three religions. Why are there three religions? Because that's interesting. Why always three? Three bases in baseball. That's, three steps in Freemasonry. One first step, second step, and third step. First degree, second degree, and third degree. Why always three? Well, because it goes back to all gods in the ancient world were always three in one God. We say that about Christianity. God is three in one God. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost. No, it goes back to Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. the three gods of Egypt into one God called Brahmanism. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Egypt was Osiris, Isis, Horus. And Christianity is the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Judaism has Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the three main gods. And I remember talking back in 1960 to rabbis and asking them, was there an Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in actual history? And they said, it's just a story. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Isis. Our Catholic have Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. All gods were based on three. Why? Because the sun, when it comes up, was our newborn Savior. At high noon, it became known as the Most High God, and at night it would die. And so it was the three stages of the sun: baby, father, and old man who's going to die. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit who dies. And so the whole idea of three gods in one, that goes back to the sun. There's only one sun, but it has three different lives. And in ancient Egypt, the newborn son, he had an official name called Horus. And we said that Horus is our risen Savior. Well, of course, Horus rises. The sun always rises about 5:30 in the morning. So Horus rises. Where does he rise? He rises on what we call the horizon. Horus rising is a horizon, and Horus takes one step. Horus lived his life in 12 steps, we're told. It came up, and a few minutes later, a little later, it became known as Horus of the first step. His first step was to come into the world. Then a little bit later, he becomes known as Horus the second step, Horus of the third step, Horus of the fourth step. He took 12 steps across the sky, and then he died. It was a 12-step program. This is why alcoholics have a 12-step program. You have a 12-step program when you go into school. You start in the first and end in the 12th grade. So it's a 12-step program. And Horus was the sun walking across the sky, which gives us Star Wars with Luke Skywalker. He's walked across the sky. Luke is a manifestation of a word, Lucifer, or wisdom. So wisdom, intellectual enlightenment is Horus. And Horus walks across the sky in 12 steps. He's Luke Skywalker. And he meets his evil father when he dies. And the evil father is called Set. He's the evil one. We call it Satan. But in the ancient Egyptians, the Satan was Set, S-E-T. Why? Because he was the prince of darkness. But they noticed they got dark at sunset. So Set is the god of darkness. Once you understand that the whole world that we live in is nothing but the more we change, the more we stay the same. We're still having the same identical worship that the ancient people 7,000 years did in the Middle East. And in the ancient world, the people had their own ancient religions, and today we're still carrying them on as they always were. The more we change, the more we stay the same. And that's why I don't think there's any hope for the human race to break loose of all the old ancient stuff and wake up and put on a whole new mindset as to who we are, where we've come from, and where we're going. And where do you go when you leave here? When you die, where do you go? Most people have never wondered, where were you 10,000 years ago? You know, you're here now, but where were you 10,000 years ago? Or better still, where will you be 5,000 years from today? When you're gone, where are you going to be 5,000 years from today? Most people don't think like that. Which is about time you start thinking about that, because it very well might be that you don't die, that you drop your body and that you go
I've actually
someplace
had a
else.
theory about that, and you were talking about the brain, but I've been reading a lot about DMT and the fact that the Indians that first made it. Well, first of all, it's kind of like one of those ideas that it's almost impossible that Indians were walking through a thick forest and just happened to come up with 3 different plants and combined them in the right way to make this compound. But anyway, they have a vision when they go, and usually they describe it as a threshold or whatever. They go through a portal to somewhere, and there's beings there, or whatever. Now, recently in modern times, people have used it for a recreational drug, and then they describe it almost exactly the same way as the Indians did. They go through a threshold, there's people there, and I've read now that we know what happens at the time of death, at the time that your mind accepts, I guess, that it's dying. Your brain is flooded with natural DMT from your pineal gland. It just floods your brain. So you go on this hallucinogenic trip while you're dying. And you go through this threshold and you meet these people. But I think that time the threshold closed behind you. And it seems like, it freaks me out when I read that, because I know that they've gone out of their way to stop any kind of ancient burial rites where your body, like a lot of cultures would allow the dead person to just kind of hang out in the house almost and have a period of time where they just sat there, the transition period. And there's a lot of evidence that suggests that our brain is active for weeks after we die. So now what they do is they stick you in a little steel box and they fill you full of formaldehyde, which is also a hallucinogen, but it doesn't make you hallucinate the way DMT would. It would be like someone on angel dust, totally confused while they're supposed to be passing over. It's almost like it's a trap not to let you progress. And this is my own personal theory, but I've noticed that they don't let people bury people anymore or have things like that. You have to do it the way the state says to do it, which is either be cremated and be destroyed immediately, pretty much, or you get to, be drugged basically in your transition and then stuck in a box, and they don't let you recycle into the nature either. You're in a box, like a mummy, and it makes me wonder, like, the Egyptians and all of them, they had a whole process in different people through mummification where they didn't destroy the brain. They didn't destroy the parts. They made sure to preserve it where it was okay for a period of time when it traveled over to the underworld or whatever. And it seems like, that kind of knowledge is well known amongst the people that run things, and they want to make sure the lowly peasant doesn't ever get the opportunity to progress, like you were talking about. The Akashic record, a lot of people talk about that, like, you've had past lives. Well, what happens whenever you can't transition anymore? I mean, is that, that's kind of a little spooky thing I've thought of, is they found a way to stop you from going to the next step or learning the next thing.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the people who are running this planet are aware of all kinds of esoteric knowledge that we haven't even, the faintest idea even exists. We could not even begin to understand it or wrap our minds around the kind of technological knowledge that the people who are running this planet actually have. They are probably leaving this planet continually, going somewhere, learning something and coming back here. And that's why they can run the world, because they are tapped into a different world than we are. And they're able to control the whole human race because of who they are. I don't think they're regular humans. I don't think these people who run the planet are regular humans.
And it seems like nothing's really changed, like you said, nothing new under the sun. Even Nebuchadnezzar there, he didn't have enough knowledge to make this thing work. And he had to go get help with some people that did know how it worked. And then, the same thing now, that you think about that concept, and I noticed that even down in Peru and places, they have these false doors in Egypt and all of these different places. That's like this idea that you pass through a gateway. So they obviously knew that you could. And then you have figures like I know you talk about the time of Aten all the time, the age of Aten, and then you have Akhenaten, who tried to bring that. It seemed like he wanted to bring that time of enlightenment back to everybody, and the Pharaoh priests there,
right.
They didn't like that, and they went out of their way, and it looks like his entire family was actually murdered, and then they destroyed evidence of him, and he was one of those first ones wanting to go over to a monotheistic thing before the Israelis did. That was Akhenaten wanted to do the same thing. And he was talking. He even moved the capital down to a place where on the solstice the sun would shine on his thing, and he was trying to maybe share some of this information, and those priests were like, no, 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 you don't. We'll just erase you from time and everything, and they destroyed all.
Yeah, I know, and you know, sun worship. The whole idea that sun is very important to the whole world. The whole world uses the sun on everything. All the institutions of the earth use the sun. Police department badges, fire department, government buildings. Wherever you go, you always see a picture, a symbol of the sun. And in Judaism, and Judaism is also has a lot of sun worship in it. And but they will tell you that the name of God is so holy that you can't use his name. But they have developed in Judaism, has developed a word which represents the Most High God, that you can't use his name, but there is a word that you can use to represent that God. As long as you use that word, it's all right, because it just represents that God. But you can't use his name. And so they call that word that they have come up with to represent God, they call that tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton is the 4 letters that make up the word for God. Tetra means 4. Gramma means a letter like A, B, C, or D is a gramma, is a letter. As tetragrammaton is tetragrammaton, A-T-O-N, tetragrammaton. Aton is the sun god of Egypt. The Egyptian sun god was called Aton, A-T-O-N. So the word for the Egyptian god is tetragrammaton, 4 letters for the Son of God, 4 letters for the Aton, tetragrammaton. And a tetragrammaton is always in all synagogues all over the earth. All synagogues always have on the altar a round sunburst with the sun spokes and sunburst and 4 Hebrew letters inside that sun. And it's on the altars of all Jewish establishments. And it's called tetragrammaton, the 4 letters for the name of God. The Aton is the God of the Hebrews, the sun worship.
Instead of saying God, you just hear them repeat the term, like in God's name, and but they won't ever say it. Like in the newer books, they don't ever really say God's name ever. It's just in God's name, and don't use God's name
that's
in vain.
why
and all
that's
of
why
that.
that's why when Christians are praying in churches and when Christians are praying to God, they always end up by saying Amen. You hear it? Yeah. Why Amen? Because Amen was the name of the sun god of Egypt, Amen Re. Amun Ra, Amun Ra, Amen Re, R-A. R-A, we put a Y on it, makes it sun ray, a sun ray. Amen was the sun god, and Re was the rays of the sun. Ra, R-A, Ra. And so Christianity is based on the Egyptian sun worship, the worship of Amen, Ra. And the Egyptians said, you cannot see God. No man can see God. No one's ever seen God. But you can see his son. So you can't talk to the president, but you could talk to his son. And his son will talk to the president, right? And so you talk to God's son, the light of the world. Jesus is the light of the world. Well, of course, the sun is the light of the world. So you can see the sun. It'll burn your eyes, but you can see the sun. So when you've seen the Son, you've seen the Father. Jesus said, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Well, that's the same thing if you have a boy. Well, everybody who sees your boy, they see you. It's your son. He just represents you. He just looks like you. He acts like you. He's like you. And so he's your son. So if I never see you, if I just see your boy, I know something about him. I know what you're like because he's like you. And so when you've seen the Son, you've seen the Father. And so that's what Jesus said. When you see me, you've seen the
You know,
Father.
a lot of people get mad at me too because I always compare. I know a lot of people think Venus is Lucifer, but um, Venus isn't always in the morning. Venus is, you know, it moves around the sky, so it's not always in the morning. And I've always thought there really is only one morning star, and that's the sun. And
That's true.
which would, you
That's
know, make a
true.
lot of people mad because Jesus is also the sun. But even in the Christian story, you know, the way I the way I see it there, even if it's not the same person, the same character, then they would be brothers anyway. If you like went ahead and believed that they were different angels, they would still be brothers, so they would still be God's sons.
Yeah, but you see, the sun in the morning, Venus is the sun, is the light in the morning. But the idea of Venus was called Lucifer. The Romans called Venus Lucifer. Lucifer does not mean the sun. Lucifer means the bringer of the light. So if we're all in the dark and you come in, you go out and get a flashlight in the garage and come in the dark house and you flip on the flashlight so we can see, you are Lucifer because you are the bringer of the light. You're the one that brings the light. So therefore, the ancient Egyptians said that when they go out 4 o'clock in the morning, they would go out and on their knees, bow to the east and watch on the horizon and watch a bright star come up. And a very bright star was Venus. And it brought the sun. It's not the sun, but when you see Venus, no, the sun's coming up right behind it. And so it was the bringer of the light of the world. The light of the world was the sun, not Venus. Venus was the one who brought the light to the world. Every morning, if you see Venus, the sun's coming. So therefore, he was the bringer of the light. Well, that's what Lucifer means, the light bringer, the one who brings the light. Well, the light was brought. The light of the world is the sun. Jesus is the light of the world. He's God's son, and he's our risen Savior. Of course, Jesus is your risen Savior because the Son is your risen Savior. Why? Simple, because if the sun doesn't come up, we're dead in about 3 weeks. If the sun doesn't show up, we're going to be frozen. We're cold anyway, but we're going to be frozen stiff in 3 weeks if there's no sun. And there's going to be no food and no ability to live. There'll be nothing on the earth that will be alive. It will be so cold and so freezing with no energy and no life. All life on the earth will be gone.
Jesus things are kind of Mithra before. I mean, before that, was that
Uh,
Mithra the sun
uh,
god as well there? And I think I heard you one time
yeah,
explaining how even the term Israel is basically just saying more of the same thing, that you know we're a nation of sun worshippers. I mean, it's got Ra in there. I
because
forgot how
in
you explained
Egypt,
it, the letters, the other letters of it, but
because in Egypt there was a worship many, many thousands of years ago in Egypt. The worship was of a female goddess named Isis. Isis was the feminine principle of theology and spirituality, basically because a man represented the harsh, cold realities of life, war and building, and to create life. But he wasn't very holy. Men were never holy. They were fighters and builders. But the woman was the nurturer of a family. The children came from the woman. The woman always brought spirituality into the marriage. She brought godliness. She brought all the qualities of God into a marriage. The woman was the one who raised the children and nurtured life and nurtured the marriage. So God was perceived in Egypt as a female presence in the universe for life. So the goddess of life in Egypt was Isis. Isis was a virgin. And this is why Jesus was born of a virgin, because of Virgo. The constellation of Virgo is virgin. And so Isis was the goddess in Egypt until Pharaoh Akhenaten came along And he said basically that Egypt was always getting the hell kicked out of them. People were always invading Egypt and mistreating the Egyptians and stealing from them. And the reason why is because your goddess is a woman. Your God is a female. Females are very soft and very tender and can be taken advantage of. But what we need is a God of war, a man God, a God that's not going to be pushed around. And so he said, the God that we're going to worship from now on, and he was Pharaoh, and he could do that, is going to be a male God. So don't think you're going to come into Egypt and rip us off and apply and apply to us the spiritual qualities of a woman. You're going to be dealing with a man when you come into this country. You better come with armaments because we're going to be waiting for you. So therefore, our God is a man of war, and his name will be Amun Ra. He is God the Father, Amun Ra. And so at the end of all your prayers, you say to him, Amun, Amen. And so you're praying to God that you cannot see, but you send your prayers through his son that you can see. So his son was called Amun Ra because he represents Amen, A-M-E-N, Ra. Ra was the sun. So in Egypt, you have Isis, and then after the fall of Isis and the coming of the new god, Ra, you have I-S-R-A, and then in the Middle East, there was another god in the Philistines. The Philistines had another god, which we call today, in the Middle East, is called Palestine. The Palestinians had a god, still do today. The Palestinian god was the planet Saturn. Saturn was called Lord of the Rings. And the Jews are still making movies for us about Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings was the planet Saturn, the Lord of the Rings. And so you have the Isis, which is I-S, and Ra, which is the sun, R-A, and the planet Saturn, who is called L-E-L. I-S-R-A-E-L. Israel is Isis, Ra, and El, the three names of the sons, three names of the gods of the Middle East, Isis, Ra,
And you
and
could kind
El.
of say to this day that that's still the
Israel.
name of the religious system there is Israel. I mean, those are still the same main characters, and then the people that program us, and I know that that's supposed to be taboo, but the majority of directors and writers and even actors, it's a
That's
high
right.
content of people or not from Israel, but of the nation of Israel now. A lot of them are
Of course.
American or wherever they come
Of
from, but
course.
they all claim to be part of the nation of Israel.
That's exactly right. And they are. That's why today we're still seeing Jewish gods like Saturn, the planet Saturn, was the god of the Jews. And the Jewish religion was the most eclectic religion on the face of the earth. In my humble opinion, I've only been looking at religion for 60 years. I'm telling you that the most eclectic religion on the earth is Judaism. By the word eclectic, I mean like a smorgasbord. You just move the tray down and pick up what you want and just take what you want. So you take a little bit of this, a little of that, a little of this, a little of that, put it all together in a big bowl, and it's called Judaism. Judaism is a connection with all kinds of cults and different ideas about God through
And
the
then on
ancient
top of
world,
that, they're using all
all
these
put into
Sumerian stories.
Yeah, Judaism is a collection of all the ancient cultures of the world and their ideas about God. Throw in there sex worship, Venus worship, moon worship is big with the Jews. Moses was the leader of a lunar cult. He worshiped the moon. And so today the Jews have Moses as a great teacher. Moses, there was no man named Moses. He never existed. Moses was a name of a leader of a moon cult in ancient Egypt. He was a lunar god, a lunar cult, a worshiper of the moon. Why? Because in Egypt, you look across east to the Sinai, and in the middle of the Sinai was a very high mountainous range in the Sinai. And every evening at 6 o'clock, the Egyptians would wait and see the moon come up from the mountain of Sinai. And so it came up after 6 o'clock. So that's why today the Jews have all their holy days after 6 in the evening. After 6 o'clock is when the moon comes out, and they were moon worshippers. And so the moon was called Allah, or in Hebrew, Yahweh. Yahweh is Allah. Allah is Yahweh. So that's why the Islamic world and the Jewish world worship the same moon god. It's called Allah, or Yahweh. And he was called the old man of the mountain. The moon god lived in the mountain, obviously, because every night he comes up from the mountain. So that's why today the Jews still have their holy days after sundown, after 6 o'clock, because that's when the moon comes
Yeah,
out.
and it's funny that you got this new group of supposed, Islamic militants named ISIS, and they're running around, and the whole moon flag for all of the Islam nations there. So they haven't let go of it. Like we kind of started out saying, they keep putting it in your face. But I really enjoyed talking to you. I have another show here in a minute, and I'm glad you gave me some time, and I really appreciate you coming on again. But
Yeah.
I kind of ate up the time I asked for there, so. But it was a great discussion. I'd love to have you
It's
back
quite
on.
all right.
I like bouncing ideas off of you. Like I'm trying to put all the pieces together for whatever reason. It'll help me in my life. I don't know if it will or not, but I'm fascinated with trying to figure out who the characters are, because I know these characters, they just keep renaming them and re-putting them, and then it's slightly different groups or whatever, but it all goes
Yeah.
back to the same thing. And I've been really trying to figure out, are we just dealing with the clans? It's just ownership clans. Like I read this story in Zachariah Sitchin's book, how he put the text together in the book of Inky there. And they have the spot where they talk about, that the Anunnaki was really freaked out by our foreskin. They didn't like it, and he wanted to cut it off. And this was Enlil, so and then I think about today how we do circumcision, and it's almost like a slave brand that we continue to this day to use for no reason now. I mean, I'm sure there was a medical reason you could argue it one day, but not really anymore in today's modern world. We got showers and soap and stuff, so. It's kind of odd to me that even here in the United States, they don't really even ask people so much most of the time. They just do it. You're just from this nation of the eagle, and and then I've been getting a lot into
That's
when
right.
it goes back to Inky and Enlil, they forget that there was more characters than just those two. There was quite a few people, and they all had their own agendas and symbols, and then we get these modern religions. It's like you said, it's just a eclectic smush up of all of this stuff. But like you said, the main people on the top, they still have a way of deciphering it, and they know what they're doing still on purpose.
That's exactly right. And that's what I'm trying to tell people, is that there is an understanding of religion and theology that we have never been told. And I have been privileged to be in the company of guys and the people at the top, and they have talked about it, and I've heard them talking about it. I know what they're talking about. It just comes natural to me. I see what they're doing. I know what the world leaders are doing. I know how they look at the earth and what the terms are, what the words are, how the symbols work. It's something that you have to study, and I've been doing it for a long time. I know we don't have a few more moments, so I'd like to just say that if you're really interested in my work, go to my website. There are different websites out there that use my name, but I only have one website, and it's Jordan Maxwell Show. Only 3 words, not 5, only 3 words, jordanmaxwellshow.com. Go to put jordanmaxwellshow.com and go to that. That's my website. And when you go to Jordan Maxwell Show, you will see a flyer on my homepage that says Jordan Maxwell Research Society. Click on that and join my Research Society website. I have 2 websites. One you get from my Jordan Maxwell Show. Go on it and click on Research Society. And that is all of the pictures and diagrams and all the documents and all the white papers and research materials I've been working with all my life. I'm trying to put everything I have in my files onto the web for people who want to know. I don't want to put it out there for everybody. I want my work to be given only to the people who it should be given to, people who want to know. So if you really want to understand all the darkness that's going on the earth in politics, religion, and government, go to jordanmaxwellshow.com and click on Research Society, Jordan Maxwell Research Society, and you will join my website. There's a small little donation. It's only a one-time donation for a lifetime subscription to all of the darkness stuff I talk about. It's all there on the website. And what's not there is going to be there. My webmaster is only one person, can only do so much work at one time. And so I'm giving him